Next Generation Health and Wellness, a better way to age. Brought to you by Southern Plus. For more info, call our 24/7 advice line on 1300 000 161 or visit southernplus.org.au.
Kind of like these start-up businesses, especially when they have a local flavour to them. You've heard of things like Airbnb and stuff like that. Well, have you heard of WA HomeStay? Well, if you haven't, let's look to the southwest, look south, young man, all that kind of stuff. It's shaping up to be a battleground between those international booking giants that I mentioned, such as HomeAway, Airbnb, and a new local booking platform, WA HomeStay. Now, it's probably fair to say that there is a certain amount of disgruntlement. That's another way of saying people aren't happy, Jack, within local communities with unregistered homes listing on website. We've got Dick Smith, he posted something on YouTube not all that long ago, and he was absolutely going stark raving bonkers, as Dick is wont to do, over booking fees going overseas. He decided to take that one on as a personal crusade. Well, here in Western Australia, HomeStay is looking to make a difference, and we're joined in the studio by Amanda Walker, who is the director of WA HomeStay. Thank you very much for coming in, Amanda.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
I know there were Christmas parties and all that sort of stuff to attend. We said, no, got to come in here. And he said, yeah, no worries. So that's really nice of you. WA HomeStay, is that sort of like a local version of an Airbnb or something similar?
It is. So we actually own a holiday home down south ourselves and decided we weren't happy with how the international booking platforms were doing things and thought we could do it better. So,
all right. Well, just to give us a bit of clarity, from the perspective of somebody who had a holiday home that they were letting out, what was happening with the international booking platforms? How did it work from your perspective as somebody who was actually the person who was letting it out?
Yeah, sure. So there was a couple of things that we weren't happy with. Firstly, there was no transparency in relation to the guest booking fees. So, HomeAway will say, oh, look, we'll give them a range between 3 and 12%, but won't let you know when they're going to charge those different percentage points. And, Airbnb's up to 16% booking fees for guests. So there's no real transparency in relation to that.
I'm like a kid with his hand up in class right now saying, how do they justify 16% for a booking fee? Let me guess, the booking fee is online and the people who do the work are the customers. So those who do the hard work are the customers. How on earth do they justify those booking fees?
Look, we don't know. We're offering 5% for guests, and we just felt that was more a fair and reasonable price.
Yeah, 16%. Gee, nice work if you can get it. No wonder these people are billionaires.
Absolutely.
You might be that way yourself eventually. All you've got to do is work out.
I don't know. The margins are a bit tight, but who knows?
What are some of the other difficulties that people encounter? Look, I know there are groups, for example, the Australian Hotels Association have been quite vocal in this area. One of the reasons why they've been so vocal, especially about some of these international booking platforms, is because they argue that the requirements for the accommodation that are provided are different. In other words, what they're saying essentially is it's not the proverbial level playing field. Do you see any other difficulties? And more importantly, if one of the giant platforms wanted to screw you over and send you out of business, would they be able to do it?
Oh, look, I think they would, to be honest. And I know they've got teams that can sandbox competitors' URLs, but that's why we're reaching out to the Perth community and WA community to get behind a WA company. And so far, the support has been amazing in relation to that. So we're not overly concerned about what the giants are doing. We're more focused on what we are. And the feedback from the local community down south, especially the other registered accommodation providers, so we're talking the B&Bs, the farm stays, they are really unhappy with the influx of unregistered homes on these booking platforms. They're seeing drops in profit of up to 70%. So that's why we've taken the stand and said, look, we'll make your life a little bit easier. We're only going to accept registered properties on our platform because we think it's the right thing to do.
Now, when you talk about a registered property, that is a property that is registered as a property of accommodation.
Correct. So different councils have different rules and some shires...
Yeah, don't we know that?
Yeah, absolutely. So depending on the local council or shire, they will have their own registration policies for holiday home accommodation. So as long as that house is compliant with those local council rules, then they can list on our property, list on our site.
So when you talk about unregistered homes, this really becomes a problem, because what happens also, despite the fact that there are various different vested interests that argue, but people like Bradley Woods and the AHA are right, that it's not a level playing field. We have people who just simply registered their homes. They're not necessarily providing and meeting the necessary health and safety requirements that logically any other place that is leased out publicly would have to do. So therefore, there is a certain amount, especially when you book some of these places on platforms. As I see it, there are various different risks. The first risk is it really is at your own risk, because you don't know if you're going to get what you're told you're going to get. If something isn't up to standard, or if there's a problem with something, well, tough break, you're just going to have to live with it, because nothing else you can do about it. You say that you overcome these problems because what you do is only take on registered premises, which means that they've passed the necessary council inspections for that particular area.
Correct. And some local councils don't require any registration. However, I think that's going to change with the government inquiry coming up. I wouldn't be surprised if that's one of the key things through it.
I would imagine there are not too many councils in tourist precincts that wouldn't require registration.
It's interesting. They may require registration, but have they been doing compliance? And do people actually know that they require the registration? Is it something that's just in their paperwork that they haven't actually publicised? Because there's a lot of people that have been operating for a long time in some tourist precincts that honestly believed that they didn't need registration until I had approached the council and advised them otherwise.
Oh, really? And this all came about because you weren't happy with some of the things that you saw were happening in this whole industry. What's the term they use for this industry?
Short-term rentals. There's a myriad of different names. Holiday home, accommodation, booking platforms. There's a number.
How many people would be taking advantage? Let's call them homestays. How many people potentially in a year, like we've got the Christmas season coming up right now, for example, how many people would love to have a homestay down south somewhere and would be looking for it?
It's a huge market. So, City of Busselton and the Shire of Margaret River, Augusta are the two main ones that we've launched in first because our house was there. And you've got millions of visitors going down into those areas. Surprisingly, 80% from intrastate. So 80% from the WA market.
Yep.
And out of those travellers, about 20% stay in holiday home short-term accommodation, like what we're putting on our platform.
See, we used to see the beginnings of this even when I was a kid. I remember people, and we stayed in a couple of places in Dunsborough before the folks had the beach house actually, that people who were permanent residents there would decide to nick off for the summer because all the tourists were moving in and perhaps the place wasn't so much fun then, and they would lease their places out. So this sort of thing is not new. But I guess once we saw the introduction of things like Airbnb, I suppose we had disruptive technologies that moved into the place. Generally speaking, has anyone done any homework to find out what the satisfaction rates now are for a lot of people? Because I know I looked online, there seems to be a mixed bag. Sometimes people get something and they say, I'm really happy. Other times they've said, I didn't get what I expected. I got mucked around. The place wasn't what I was told it was going to be because after all, you're just showing photographs anyway. And so they left very disgruntled. But if you happen to have travelled some considerable distance, well, there's not an awful lot you can do about it when you find out that what you've got isn't what you thought you were going to get.
No, absolutely. And look, I've had that experience myself. We've got a small family. We stayed in a home that we thought was going to be clean and it wasn't, and we're left holding the baby. So, of course, those horror stories happen. And I think they can happen regardless of what platform you use. But I guess one of the good things about being a local company is that a lot of the times I've walked past the houses that I've listed. I can see the place. I know the locality of the areas and can help the guests if they do end up falling into trouble.
How many people have you got on your site at the moment?
So 130 are published and there's another 40 in Mandurah actually that are almost going to go live. The process a little bit slow because we're needing those registration details and all the rest, but the support has been incredible and there's probably another 20 in the background as well that are looking to come on shortly.
Wow. So in an ideal world, you want to corner the market in Western Australia, so you'll be seen as like a local booking agent. Is that more or less how it's going to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So a local booking agent that are offering the same properties but for less booking fees.
And can be done online.
Can be done online.
How do you go about ensuring that people are representing their accommodation the way that it really is?
That's a really good question. And look, WA is still a really big state. So even though we're a local company, it's a big task to go around and personally check out each of those accommodations. And I would never purport to say we do that. However, again, going back to making sure that the homes are registered with the accommodation, registered with the local council, gives the guests an assurity that, yeah, these properties are there. They've done the right thing by the council. And then there's obviously photos and the rest, and someone local that they can call and say, no, that was actually a complete misrepresentation. And then I can follow up and ensure that house cleans up their act.
Are you also able to pick up a little bit of the vibe locally? Like, for example, if you have a place that might be advertised and might, for all intents and purposes, meet the registration, but locals kind of know the place is a bit of a dive, are you able to pick up that vibe where somebody might say to you, you know something, Amanda, I don't know if I'd go there?
Oh, absolutely. And it's one of those things about that local flavour of, making sure that things are going right. Because in the end, we want guest satisfaction and we want the repeat bookings. So it's in our best interest to make sure the properties that list are respectable. And to be honest, I've had personal contact with the property managers, all the owners, and doing everything we can to ensure our product is the best there.
What's the feedback you've got from general customers as to what they would like to see and what they hope that you'd be able to provide through WA HomeStay that they can't get through these international booking agents? Where do they see the shortcomings?
Yeah, sure. So from a homeowner's perspective, because there's two kind of users, if you like, of
there's
the
both
website.
sides of the mix, isn't there?
So the homeowner's cash flow is a massive thing. So the bigger platforms keep hold of our cash until the first day of stay, which has massive impact. If someone's paid a 20% deposit a year out for a Christmas booking, you don't see that money until they actually rock up to your house.
Gee, that's a nice little racket.
Yes. So we're offering basically, if we get the money, we distribute it to our owners. We don't keep hold of it. Other than that, we're also supporting Telethon, which is good. So we're giving $1 for every booking to Telethon, which is a nice little local flavour. It's giving back to the community. And again, the registered accommodation, just basically ensuring that only holiday homes that are registered list means that the other accommodation providers like the bed and breakfasts, like the farm stays, can operate in a sustainable way. They're not fighting against every unregistered home on booking platforms. It's only the registered ones.
How many unregistered homes are there out there? I mean, I know it's going to be a ballpark figure, but if, let's say, for example, let's just use a figure, for every 10 registered, what would be your ballpark figure as to how many unregistered might be floating around out there?
Oh, look, that's a good question, and I haven't done the research. I know that there's 700 registered homes in the city of Busselton, and that is quite a large area. So you're talking Yallingup, Busselton, Dunsborough, that whole area. However, I can guarantee you the listings on those platforms are a lot higher.
So you'd guess it'd be at least another 700 unregistered. That would be what you'd consider a reasonably educated guess? Sure.
I mean, and it depends on the area as well.
More.
It could be more. And for some of the councils where there's been some miscommunication, that figure would be huge. It's almost 100% unregistered because they honestly didn't know that the council required registration or wanted registration.
So, mind you, there is an old saying under the law, ignorance is no excuse. Mind you, of course, if the council isn't going out and policing it. But something tells me that somewhere like the Shire of Busselton would, because I've got a sneaking suspicion there might be dollars in it for them. And if there's one thing councils can smell a mile away, it's $1.
Absolutely. And I think the government inquiry, if they weren't interested in chasing it before, I think their arms are going to be twisted come June.
All right, now how do we find out more about WA HomeStay? You know, I'm going to ask you for a website. And of course, this applies from both sides of the fence. This is if you're looking for accommodation or if you have accommodation that you can provide.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's wahomestay.com.au. And also the email address, just put an admin in front of it, admin@wahomestay.com.au. And I'm looking forward for any submissions holiday homeowners might have in relation to the government inquiry about short-term accommodation. So I'm collating something for the government inquiry. So if you've got an opinion on it, I'd love to hear from you.
Oh, so you want to put a submission in?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've already canvassed a number of opinions for from the short-term stays that have listed on the property already.
Are the opinions diverse, or are there some fairly common themes?
Fairly common themes, but tensions are running high because the registered accommodation providers down there are very vocal about the issue. Mostly the holiday home owners believe that they are providing a holiday experience that is like no other. You can't replicate it in a hotel. It's a very important part of the tourism industry. If you want to take your pet, if you want to go away for a wedding, large groups, it's very, very important. And if we stifle that and over-regulate it, we're at risk of losing it.
So we've got to get it sensible. And that's going to be the problem, isn't it? Because what you're really essentially saying is we have to find balance. And that's sometimes easier said than done.
Absolutely. And with the AHA and Airbnb tearing strips of each other, it's we're just kind of floating in the middle saying, look, there's a middle road.
I think the problem is always going to be if you have different groups operating under different rules and regulations, or in some cases arguably no rules and regulations, then you don't have a level playing field. We can all argue we're over-regulated. I mean, God knows we live in the nanny state. Really, I'm waiting for somebody to say, we're going to supply the toilet paper for you as well, because we get a bit like that. However, if you do have a bunch of people operating and the regulations are different between each group, then you're not going to get a fair outcome, are you?
You're not, but different levels of accommodation should have different levels of regulation. So, bed and breakfasts have to jump through health regulations because of their food provision and all of that. Now, holiday homes, it's basically a home away from home. So, yes, ensure that if you're in a bushfire area, you've ticked that box, and general council registration policies apply in relation to environmental noise complaints, all of those kind of things. But just don't overcomplicate it.
Good luck with that. I like the way you're thinking, but I do say good luck. Now, that website again is wahomestay.com.au, and you're also looking for submissions because you want to make a submission, and the email address for that is admin@wahomestay.com.au.
That's correct.
Amanda Walker, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Chris.
And very nice to meet you, and very nice to be able to have a chat about this, because I know this is one of those growing issues, and especially as we move into the holiday season, undoubtedly people are going to run into this in one way or another.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.